You're welcome. And I think one of my students had some, she wanted to ask something about Syria. So you can ask now if you want.
Yes, sorry, Ustad, I don't want to take up too much time because I know it's late over there, but I just wanted to ask about your opinion on the situation in Syria right now.
Can I just add as well about the Syria situation? I'm not fully averse with there's many groups there, and it's quite complex a scenario there throughout history. But it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on it. Yeah.
So who's got a thought? Somebody tell me your thought and I'll tell you, I'll correct you or agree with you.
It just seems like the situation in Gaza has just escalated through Lebanon and then further afield into Syria. It's just like many different factions of groups that some are related to whatever a mission they're trying to achieve there.
Mm. Who's heard of that it's a Jewish plot and a CIA conspiracy?
No.
But you have heard of that, right? Have you heard of people saying?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
that the fact that they're funding and infiltrating puppet leadership.
Mm. There's two reasons for that. First of all, is no conspiracy. But why people think it's a conspiracy is because people are emotional and people never study and people forget. This hap For 10 years, people have been watching the horror of what's been happening in Syria, but all of a sudden everybody has amnesia. So now everybody is trying to do catch up and trying to find out what's happening. But because people don't want to do catch up, it's very easy to say, oh, this group came out of nowhere. Another very emotional thing that they're saying is why now? Why when Gaza and why when Syria? Okay, let's break that down. Why not now? Does the world stop just because there's one war going on? People have their own wars, and just because there's a war in Gaza, are people going to stop fixing their own problems? There's a million other wars in other parts of the Muslim world. Nobody gives a diddly squat about them. So why don't people say, why now when there's a war going on in Sudan or in Libya or in Yemen? Why is it Palestine? That's because Palestine is everywhere. That's the only reason why. Right? Otherwise, there's bigger crimes happening in Sudan. There's a massive refugee crisis going on there. There's a genocide and like a human rights genocide and crime going on in Yemen for the last decade that America and England are complicit in. Nobody's mentioned that. They've just picked up the bandwagon of Gaza just for the hell of it, right? We're not getting Gaza back anytime soon. It's not happening, right? And if anybody had any doubt of Israel's power, you've seen it now. Israel is only able to do what it's able to do because the Muslims are cowards, and the Muslims will carry on staying as cowards, and they've seen what happens to countries that stand up to Israel. So even more reason for them to remain as cowards. Up till yesterday, Iran's star, if we can say it that way without it being called shirk, was rising. Iran was doing really well. Iran, for the last 40 years, had been propping itself up. 30 years, it had been propping itself up, shoring itself up. Because all around, just like Israel, all around Iran are hostile enemies. Right? On the right-hand side, the Taliban. Further afield, Pakistan. Underneath it, Iraq. On its left side, Saudi Arabia. All hostile to Iran. So for the last 30, 40 years, Iran had been trying its best to create some sort of hegemony in the area, to strengthen itself up, and to have its own vassals and people that it could rely upon in a time of need. And it did an excellent job. Much better job than any Arab could have done. The other main competitor is Saudi Arabia. It's basically a two-horse race in the Middle East because Iraq is completely finished since 1990. It's basically Saudi and Iran now. In a war, who would win? Of course, Iran would win. Even though Saudi Arabia has the world's best armaments, but it's Saudi Arabia at the end of the day. And Iran is Iran. It's no small boy. And Saudi Arabia wanted its dominance. That's the reason why it attacked Yemen. Saudi Arabia wants to be the top dog, and Iran wants to be the top dog. Saudi Arabia is not doing it because it wants to survive. It just wants to do it. Iran is doing it because Iran has to survive. Iran was very successful. Yemen, it's got the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Syria. Iran had the Sunnis completely surrounded. But in one swift action by the Jews, Iran is more or less now on the back foot. Hezbollah has been set back, not destroyed, but set back by about a decade or 15 years. The same thing happens every single time Hezbollah messes with Israel. It gets put back tens of years, right? And once again, it's been put back. Huge psychological blow this time is that the leadership died. This has never happened before, right? Israel is now able to pick off people wherever it wants. And that's the most scariest part. Right? Nobody feels safe no more, and Israel can do what it wants and say what it wants and pick you off for speaking. So this is the reason why now everybody is even more frightened, and you would never see an Arab nation now speak out because they know that they can easily get picked off. The question of Syria. Syria has been bombed by Israel for the last 10 years also. Syria has never been able to do anything back. Right? With impunity, Syria regularly every day bombs Syria. And it's not in the news because it's a regular occurrence. What has Syria done back? Nothing. It just fires off rhetoric. Syria is not in a position to do anything. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. It's in Israel's interests to make sure that Bashar stays in power. Because Israel knows Bashar is weak and Bashar can do nothing. Israel doesn't know this new group, and for all Israel knows, this new group is going to cause it problems, right? So why would Israel be funding this group? To destabilize Syria? Why? Because of Iran? Iran doesn't need Syria to strengthen itself. Iran only got involved in Syria in 2015, and Syria can do nothing for Iran. Hezbollah is its main ally that Syria has built up and Iran has built up, and Iran built up Hezbollah without using Syria. So Syria is nothing for Iran, absolutely nothing for Iran. If you want to say a staging post, then Lebanon was a staging post for Iran because Hezbollah is the most powerful faction in Lebanon, and its army, its standing army, is more powerful than the Lebanese National Army, who are basically just as weak as Syria's army. So if anybody believes that this is a CIA plot, it doesn't serve any purpose. People who say this are just conspiracy theorists that like to say, oh, the war was going on, and why did they do this now? Why did they? People have always done this. When ISIS appeared, when Taliban appear, when this group appears, that group appears, people who don't like to study, like to shoot the breeze, and it's very easy to make up conspiracy theories and make yourself feel good. What did you do for the war effort? Nothing. What can you do? Nothing. At least read up on the subject. You can't even do that. So there's nothing to do with the CIA or Israel. In fact, it's in the CIA interest and Israel's interest to keep the regime going, because the regime is ramshackle, it's barely surviving, it's no harm to Israel, it's no harm to anybody. It's basically a dead zone next to Israel that serves no purpose for anybody. It basically serves the purpose of nobody can attack Israel from that side. Jordan's a puppet, complete puppet. Saudi Arabia's normalized relationships. So why would they want to get rid of the Syrian regime and put a Islamist regime there? A regime, a group known as terrorists. Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose? There's your answer, answered right there. Second thing is, who is this group? This group didn't come from nowhere. This group has been around for a long time. Syria was never really off the radar for anybody, but it was off the radar for most people because the news doesn't show it. But just because the news not showing what's happening in Sudan doesn't mean there's nothing happening in Sudan. Just because the news doesn't show you the horrific mess that Libya is, doesn't mean that Libya is not a mess. Just because the news is not showing you ISIS, horrific ISIS attacks in Afghanistan, it doesn't mean that the Taliban are not having to deal with ISIS there. right? So what you can't, out of sight, out of mind. That's the reason why everybody now is watching the news and in shock, thinking, where did this come from? But it was always there. This group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, has been running Idlib since 2016 or 17 when a peace deal was made. In 2015, Russia, Bashar al-Assad was gone. He was on his last tippy toes, right? He would have been finished had it not been for Iran entering, Hezbollah entering as a proxy of Iran, and Russia entering. Russia did the fighting with its mercenaries, the Wagner group, and its aircraft and bombing, and Syria used its proxies, Hezbollah, to do the fighting, and both forces are superior than Bashar's ramshackle crap $30 a month. Yes, you heard right. $30 a month wage army. I have friends, I have a friend who's a soldier, and I know other people that have run away from the army there in Syria. Hezbollah would have totally died. Iran's role was Iran's direct role was basically managing the war. So basically strategy and where to attack next and what not to do. Even then, Israel was bombing Syria, right, for its own reasons. In 2007, Israel ran an operation and blew up a nuclear reactor, a possible some nuclear kind of program site. Syria, as always, Bashar, the greatest liar in the world, so shameful, disgraceful, doesn't even care that he lies and nobody believes him, said, no, this was a factory that they destroyed, and we will get them back when we can, when we want, at our timing. Yeah, right, like they would do anything. But Syria is so bold that in the war between Iran and Iraq in 1986, 87, I think, Iran 50% blew up one of Iraq's nuclear faculties, did great damage to it, but it didn't completely destroy it. Israel was very worried about this. So Israel sent its fighter planes over Jordanian sovereign territory, Saudi sovereign territory, and went all the way to Iraq and completed the job that Iran didn't manage to complete. Destroyed the reactor and came back. So you've just invaded airspace of 3 countries and nobody was able to do anything, right? That's how bold Israel is, and Saudi Arabia didn't even know and could do nothing. And the communication between Iraq and Jordan was so bad that by chance, the king of Jordan, King Hussein, was on his royal yacht in the Dead Sea, enjoying himself when he saw but don't forget, by the way, Jordan has relations with Syria, with Israel now. They have excellent relations. You saw that they were bombing missiles out of the sky. They were doing the dirty work for Israel. That's how sold out Jordan is. Back then, it probably a bit different. The king saw Jordanian airplanes fly, Israeli airplanes fly from Israel over the Dead Sea, over Jordan, and he knew exactly where they were going. They were going to Pakistan, Iraq. The reason I said Pakistan is because something similar happened with Pakistan as well. So he tried his best through his military, contact somebody on that side, contact Saddam Hussein, they were unable to establish contact. That's how bad communication was. They were unable to establish contact. And what happened is Israel flew over, destroyed the thing, and flew back. Israel did the same thing in 2007 for Syria, and again, Syria could do nothing. Israel regularly bombs thingy. I've even got video footage of Israel bombs in recent bombs the other day, right, in Damascus, right, damaging a building, and the only people that killed there was like a Syrian nurse and a Yemeni family. They reckon it was Hezbollah fighters or whatever. So Israel, for all it cares, it wants Bashar, right? The CIA, for all it cares, not the CIA, the American foreign policy, wants Bashar, because Bashar is not a threat to anybody now. These groups are still a threat, according to them. Now, this particular group, we need to go back a little bit. In 2014-15, as I said to you, Bashar was on his tippy toes. He was on his way out. if Russia had not come in and Iran had not come in, there would be no Bashar today. Everything would be over. Maybe it would have descended into chaos like Afghanistan did, or it would have been over and they would have been managed to do something. Enter ISIS. ISIS, an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda on drugs, Al-Qaeda on amphetamines, Al-Qaeda on steroids, basically, on cocaine, crack. They entered the foray and they were the worst Islamist group that the world has ever seen. They were so evil, in fact, that all the other groups in the area got together along with the Americans, along with the Syrian army, along with the Kurds, and everybody fought ISIS to destroy ISIS. This is the same ISIS that people, Joeys from England, were going to join. Right? ISIS is full of punks, full of uneducated, just like Al-Qaeda, just like Wahhabiyya. They're not full of punks, but Wahhabi religion doesn't really have intellectual clout. And I don't care if they don't like what I say. Statistically, this is it. Right? So that group was full of punks. And I remember how everybody got excited. Oh, the caliphate, the caliphate. In 2021, when the Taliban took over, people started getting excited as well. And I'm on a British forum full of journalists, politicians, and ulama. And I said to them, caution everybody. I said, remember what happened in Taliban 1.0. Don't get too excited. Remember what happened when ISIS came to power. Don't get too excited. Any group that fights has to have a bit of a screw loose. Any group that fights has to be extreme. And if they're not extreme when they start off, they become extreme by the end. That's the reason why any Ghazi that comes back after war, he's not allowed to give fatwa. Because his mind's screwed up now. His fatwas are going to be harsh. Right? When you're tried in a military court, it's different from being tried in a civilian court. So when these guys are giving fatwa, they've seen death, destruction, war. They just know how to kill. Their fatwas are going to be harsh as well. So there was a group called, one of the earlier groups called Jabal al-Nusra. Jabal al-Nusra, again an extremist group. And in war, by the way, every group suffers. Can you see the screen? Yeah. So I just want to know who's there. In war, every group suffers. The truth dies in war. So we have testimonials from Arabs that fought under the Free Syrian Army, that fought under Jabal al-Nusra, saying we were told to write down kufri words in mosques, trying to enrage the population against the Alawite regime, right? We had people who were discontent and they left and they went back to Tunisia and they said, we did these things ourselves. We wrote those statements of kufr. In war, everybody becomes evil. In war, everybody is the same. And the first thing to die in war is the truth. And that's what happened in Syria. So those evil videos you see of the Alawites torturing innocents, I have a huge number of them if you want to see, and it's not easy viewing. And that will make you hate the regime. But who said that the ISIS was not doing the same thing? Who said the other groups weren't doing the same thing? What ISIS did is if you speak out against ISIS, they'd send a hitman and he'd knock on your door and your whole family would be inside and he'd shoot you dead. We have testimonials. People who joined ISIS said we were hitmen. And if you do not do the hitman, and the ISIS is killing its Muslims. I could be a Sunni Sufi and I could speak out against ISIS. In the middle of the night, a hitman is going to turn up to my door and shoot me dead in front of my family. No questions asked. And this is the truth about many of those groups there, and certainly ISIS, and certainly the regime. ISIS was killing Muslims. You got videos of ISIS killing women. Under what charges? ISIS did nothing to attack against Israel. ISIS did nothing in Iran. ISIS did nothing anywhere. All ISIS did is kill Muslims, Sunni Muslims in Iraq and in Syria. They enslaved Yazidi women. Before this, nobody knew about the Yazidi sect. They first came to prominence because of ISIS. Even in the time of Saddam Hussein, we didn't know about the Yazidis because they're Kurds. In Afghanistan, ISIS goes into hospitals, specifically goes into baby wards, maternity wards, killing babies. This is ISIS in Afghanistan. Where's the logic? But in war, there is no logic. Everyone becomes a criminal in war. Another offshoot of ISIS is called Boko Haram, right? Boko Haram, I've been told by Africans that it translates as speaking English is haram. Speaking English, because obviously English is to do with the West and your enemy is the West. What has Boko Haram done? Go onto YouTube and just research them. See their videos. Boko Haram has been terrorizing their own people, their own villages, literally going into schools and kidnapping hundreds of schoolgirls and taking them into the jungle. And it's been years and we don't know where those girls are. Periodically, girls trickle back with horrific stories. The guy who's the madman, who's the head of Boko Haram, he is giving speeches and he looks like he's on drugs. Something is wrong with him. He looks like he's on drugs, right? And what's his life? What's his religious life? To literally go around slaughtering Muslims. What's the average religious life of a Daesh, of an ISIS person? To literally go around slaughtering Muslims without trial, without due justice, without anything. Forget about the kuffar. They passed the line of Muslims. Let's first destroy the Muslims. This is the reality of Daesh. This is the reality of Boko Haram, right? These other groups, they're less of terrorist entities, but they're all pins from the same pin pad, right? Some pins are more sharp, some pins are more blunt. There was a group that emerged in 1915-14 in the early period of the war, 12, whatever, called al-Jabal al-Nusra, the Nusra Front, under many names. Jabal al-Nusra, Nusra Front. They keep morphing because what it is just like what happened in Afghanistan, as well as fighting the Russians, they were fighting each other. So me as an Afghan commander, I would not allow the Mujahideen to pass through my territory because I'm proud. This is my territory. I want the name. I want the shahura. I want everybody to say, yeah, I am the man in my area, the one who's protecting you. And if that Mujahideen group goes past me and does something good, his name will go up. If you read the history of the Mujahideen, they were killing each other as much as they were killing the Russians, ruthlessly killing and torturing each other. So if anybody gets any ideas of like, wow, these are Mujahids, these are the people of God. No, they're not. They are just like you and I, humans. And in fact, they've got interests because they have weapons and they have arms. And when you get power, power makes you mad. This is what all groups did in Iraq. This is what all groups are doing in Syria. This is what all groups are doing in Afghanistan. Right?
Ustad,
Yeah.
you know, just a point about ISIS, yeah, obviously they're mad people, aren't they? But isn't that how, like, sort of, you know, the Saudi regime, how, you know, how they came into power? It's only because people have accepted them. Because essentially they were like ruthless as well when they came in.
The thing with the Saudi regime,
They were not that much different to what they did when they came in.
Yeah, but see, there's a difference between a terrorist regime and a regime that seeks power through Saudi did. The early Wahhabi regime didn't indiscriminately kill people, right? Yes, they killed Muslims. They killed Muslims for the smallest of things, whatever they believed was shirk and kufr. They went around Mecca asking the Muslims in Mecca, where is Allah? And if you gave him the wrong answer, Allah hay bas, they would kill you. They would kill you, right? But there's a big difference between Daesh and between the Saudi regime.
No, but what I'm trying to say is, you know, because people sort of accepted the regime, and so they're just living because they want peace. And obviously, the Saudi regime, they've got like a section, the religious section where, you know what I mean, the Wahhabiyah, where they keep that separate. Do you know what I mean? So suppose like the ISIS, you know, if everyone was accepting of them, they would have probably just established like a similar kingdom. I'm just trying to give you like an example, because obviously people were not accepting it and there was like loads of groups fighting against them. Obviously that's why they ended up like, you know, slowly diminishing.
So, but you have to ask yourself, why did everybody, even the other groups, extremist groups, get together and fight ISIS? It's because they were super crazy and nobody agreed with them. The
Yeah,
thing
that's true.
is the more crazy the group, the less chance of you surviving into a political entity. The more crazy you are, people are going to take you out. You're going to
Yeah,
it's basically you're going to self-implode, right? You're going to self-destruct. So the more
true.
crazy you are, the more you're going to self-destruct. So Al-Qaeda self-destructed, ISIS self-destructed. The Saudi regime, yes, they perpetrated heinous crimes, but which regime in 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 human history hasn't done that, right?
Hmm.
I mean, the Romans, when they went into territory, did massacres. The Chinese, the Africans, the Arabs, not Muslim Arabs, but I'm talking, just warfare. Like the Assyrians. If you look at some of the stuff the Assyrians did, the Akhidians, sorry, they would flail you alive, and we have inscriptions, we have pictograms, like I showed you in the Sirah,
Yeah.
right? We have them flaying people alive. So they would take your skin off, completely flail you, right? And they would post that skin, they would nail it to the gates of the city for everybody to see. And then they would take your eyes out and torture you, just like the cartels of Mexico. This is the
Hmm.
Acadians, and we have this in inscription form of what they did, right? So all humans are barbarians. And the Saudi regime was not like ISIS in any way. ISIS is on a next level, right? The Saudi regime were very tame compared to ISIS. So this group, Jabal al-Nusra, came about, and it was the Nusra Front, Jabal al-Nusra. And at one time, ISIS wanted to, that guy al-Baghdadi, whatever his name is, Baghdadi wanted this guy underneath his wing. So this guy in the early period, he didn't want to join Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, because if he had joined Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, then he would have had no power over his own group. Because one of the conditions is that now you have an Amir, you have a Khalifa, and he takes charge of your militia, basically what you've built up. So he was clever. He said, no, I'm not doing that. So he fought against ISIS, and he aligned with Al-Qaeda for a little while. So he's been accused of being Al-Qaeda. So he did align with Al-Qaeda only to get away from ISIS, right? And that name is stuck forever with him. But he slowly pushed away all the groups. So in 2016, and 2017, when the regime took back Aleppo, right? Because Aleppo is in the extreme north, right? They made a deal with the Kurds. They took back Aleppo. They took back most of the kingdom. They ended up defeating all of these small groups, right? Some of these small groups morphed into ISIS. Some of them morphed into bigger groups. The regime destroyed most of them, destroyed ISIS with the help of the Kurds and everybody else. And this one splinter group was left. Jabal al-Nusra, it became Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And they had a place in Idlib. Idlib is to the top extreme left. It was like a fiefdom, very small fiefdom. But the difference between this group and other groups is this group, their hierarchy is educated. They're not bums and thugs like ISIS, right? They went about trying to set about an independent state, and they did incredibly well, right? They provided services for everybody. I actually taught online with a university there. That's why I know about this group, right? So I was teaching, and I was surprised and amazed at how they had a functioning university there, right? And a deal was cut with Turkey and Syria that they're going to back off. So this is the zone, this is Idlib, and this is the rest of Syria, and there's going to be a ceasefire for a few years or whatever. And ceasefires form two reasons. One is it gives you breathing time to reassess and negotiate, and it gives you time to build yourself as well. So this group, instead of just being happy with what it was doing, it slowly set about building itself up into a powerful, small mini fiefdom. They provided electricity, which they got from Turkey. They had arms, they had telephone lines, they had everything that a government would have. They were giving their people services. Meanwhile, in Syria proper, The regime is struggling. 8 hours a day, no electricity, which is now now it's at the moment 12 hours a day of no electricity. You're giving government soldiers $40 or $30. This was the going rate 15 years ago, and this is the going rate now when everything has gone expensive, right? So this group, and then in the north you had the Kurds. The Turkey doesn't like the Kurds, right? Because they share borders with the Kurds on the other side, and all the Kurds in all the regions, the 4 countries, they want their own independence. So they have terrorist acts and everything. So what Turkey did is Turkey paid Arab groups. There were groups, Arab fighting groups there. Turkey put them on the payroll to fight off the Turks and Kurds and create zones away from the border where Turkey would be safe, right? The Kurds have done incredibly well, highly organized, secular state. It's like a state within a state, you can say. It's their own, it's with government agreement. The same thing that is happening in Iraq. Look how well they're doing in Iraq. Look how well they're doing in Syria. There's factional fighting in Iraq between Sunni and Shia, revenge, and yet the Kurds are prospering because they're secular. The Kurds want to be secular in Iraq. In Syria, they're prospering, while we've got factional fighting between Sunni and Shia in the rest of the country. So we've got, now in the picture, we've got the Kurds, we've got some rebel groups that are funded by Turkey, and this particular area of Idlib was supported by Turkey. Why? Because had Bashar al-Assad fought them, a new wave of hundreds of thousands of refugees would have gone into Turkey, and Turkey doesn't want any more refugees. So this is the reason why Turkey brokered this deal. And it's in Turkey's interest that Syria never invades this area, right? How much Syria is helping this, Turkey is helping this area? Actually, very little. This group is self-sufficient. They've done so well that they're more or less self-sufficient, with the odd probably financial or military help from Turkey. We don't know the details of, but it's in Turkey's interest that this group stays, and it stays where it is. Because if this group moves, refugees start going into Turkey. If Syria attacks, refugees start going into Turkey. Turkey did tell Bashar al-Assad many times, let's sit on the table, let's find out what's happening, because I've got Kurds at my border that I don't need. You have got problems. Let's come to an agreement and see what we can do about Syria. Bashar said to him, first you leave my territory, right? That's like the underdog telling the bully, dictating to the bully what to do. Turkey didn't agree to that, obviously, and Bashar didn't back down. So as a result, nothing was resolved. In the meantime, this particular group has been contacting other militias. It's not working alone. There are still pockets of other resistance there. Daesh still exists in tiny, tiny forms. And they were planning and they unified, right? People say, why now? Strategically, this is the best time. Hezbollah is busy. Russia is screwed up in Ukraine. All its energies and money is being poured into Ukraine. And Hezbollah, all its energies is being focused into Iran, in Lebanon at the moment. It can't do anything. So this is the best time. The Syrian army is a tin can, a paper tiger. It can't do anything, as you can see what happened, right? And now, and it expected to take Aleppo, but it didn't expect to take Aleppo so quickly. So it's taken Aleppo, the second most city, Hama is taken. Strategically very important, because the original, the Brotherhood were killed there in 1982 by his father, Hafiz al-Assad. And Homs, they've taken, well, they're on the verge of taking, and that shuts off the main trunk roads going into Latakia. Latakia is where the bases of the Russian bases are there in Latakia, and Bashar al-Assad's Alawite stronghold is from there. So when you've cut that off, basically you've cut off Bashar's main forces, right? In the south, Dar'a, which is very important because that's where the original uprising started in 2011, has been taken over now, and the Kurds have seen what's happening and they've jumped on board as well, and they've started hostilities. And in the extreme south, you've got the Durzi, the Druze Arabs, who have taken up arms as well, but they're not really armed, so they can't do much, but they've ended up turfing out the military from their area. So now Bashar has to make war on two fronts, right? If the Kurds do align with this group, we're talking a week and it's all over.
It's basically cornered, isn't he?
he's cornered like he was before. He's in the southeast like he was before when Russia and Iran came in. This time, the Iranians are leaving and the Russians are leaving. And I've got video footage of the Russians actually leaving from the seaport. They're in their carriers, they're in their bloody their frigates, and they're going. Right? So, but this is the only port that Russia had in the warm waters of Arabia, right? So it needs it. I don't see Russia pulling out. It will be humiliating for Russia to pull out now. And this was its only access to the Arab world, right? So I don't know what Russia is going to do. I don't think it can do anything. And Iran also, Iran, in 1 month, everything has turned around for Iran. From Iran being a major powerhouse, seems like now it's losing everything, right? It's Hezbollah's been put back 10 years, and its strategic partner, Syria, is gone, right? Religiously, they aligned only because of religion, but to be honest with you, the Ithna Ashriya cannot stand the Alawiyya because the Alawiyya by essence are not Muslims, right? They worship Sayyidina Ali. Now this is people don't need to believe this, but I know this from inside information. I know this. I have family that are Alawites, right? We have family members that are Alawites, so I know this from the inside. But the majority will not say it. Why? Because they don't know anything about their religion. They're not taught anything about their religion. So if you ask them what your belief is, most people would say, yeah, we believe in Allah, right? But the ones who do know about their religion, they worship Sayyidina Ali, right? So as a result, the Ithna Ashriya couldn't care less about them. In the early part of the last century, in the 30s and the 40s, basically France left them, and before the French left, they started to put a few of the Alawites into positions of power. Into the army. The Alawites had been isolated for centuries. So you had Jabal al-Duruz and Jabal al-Nusayriya, right? Now, when Hafiz al-Assad came to power, he renamed both of these mountains, right? Jabal al-Duruz is exclusively for the Durziya, the Duruz, who are not Muslim. They openly say we're not Muslim, right? But the Nusayriya like to hide their religion, taqiyya, right? But inside, if they believe Sayyidina Ali is Allah, they're not Muslims. Right? The Durziya keep their religion a secret. They don't tell anybody their religion. They don't even know it themselves. But this is the most stupid thing about them. Sorry, I shouldn't be insulting any religion. I'll take back my words. This is the most illogical thing about them. What do you believe in? We don't know. But you believe it's the truth, right? Yes, we believe it's the truth. This is their faith, right? So the Alawi are the same. They don't know their religion. There's a third religion in Turkey called Alevi, Bektashi Alevi. Same name, but slightly different faith. The Durziya and the Alawiya both believe in reincarnation. The Durziya, they say we're not Muslims, so it doesn't matter. The Alawiya claim to be Muslims, yet they believe in reincarnation, right? So in the early part of the last century, in a bid to bring them into the mainstream Syrian society, because they were persecuted, they were in their mountain. They were poor people living in the mountain, isolated from the rest of society. The Turks had massacred them once before, and there were problems with them, right? And they didn't trust anybody, and they would occasionally murder Sunnis, and the Sunnis would massacre them, and it was just the way it was. But the French started giving them positions in the army. Back then, the rich, the influential Sunni households, they would see going into the army as something below them. They wouldn't go into the army. So Alawites started to come down from the mountain and go into the mountains, into the army. Before the army, the French did a census in Syria, and they found out there were only a handful of Alawites in the whole city of Damascus. Literally a handful. Like we're talking about 40 or something. And most of them, since forever, even when they started coming down more, they were only working as servants and maids and babysitters in Sunni households. They were nobody, basically. They were just literally nobody, right? And it's because they started going into the army that they started to gain power. Right? Hafiz al-Assad was an Air Force commander. Hafiz al-Assad, in a coup, toppled his president, who was from the Attasi family. The Attasi family is a very, very influential family going back hundreds of years. Very religiously influential and economically influential family. Hafiz al-Assad toppled him and put him into prison for 22 years. Subhanallah, you've toppled your ruler. Send him into exile. Why are you putting him into prison for 22 years? And the only reason he was let out is because he was on his deathbed. And he flew out to France and he died in France. The Attasi family could do nothing to get him out. Let's not get into the abuses, because it's a very sore subject for me. The abuses of the Alawite family. People who don't know the nitty-gritty will not know how bad it really was. But I can send you videos and you're going to say, Toba, Toba. Subhanallah. Right? So Iran doesn't really care. So what the early Alawites started to do is, in a bid to gain accreditation and to be normalized into Syrian society, the elders started to send a few of them into Iraq to study. That you lot are so ignorant. They don't know. They had no fiqh. They don't pray. They fast in a different way compared to us. They fast the 10 days of Ashura as well, right? Many of their things are different from us. So students were sent to Iraq to study Ithna Ashriya creed, and to study what's their fiqh called? Jafariya, fiqh Jafariya. Those students came back and wrote a book. They basically ran away because the Ithna Ashriya said, who the hell are you? What kind of a belief? What is this? You claim to be Shia and yet there's nothing Shia about you. And they would condescend them, bully them, and these students came back. And we have their books where they describe their bad experience in these places. Basically, today they follow fiqh Jafari. They only follow fiqh Jafari because it's been imposed upon them. They needed some legitimacy, so they went to a very famous, very, very famous Shia cleric who, in his mad dog zeal, we all know who the West calls mad dog, Gaddafi. Gaddafi had him killed. This guy was one of the most influential, from one of the most influential families, Arab families. He was a Shia, his name, I can't remember his name. Very, very influential Shia, very, very influential Shia cleric, right? And he went on an official trip to Iraq, to Gaddafi, and Gaddafi had him killed, right? During the war, the Gaddafi's downfall, the Lebanese sent an investigative team to find out about this cleric. And they spoke to the old bodyguards of Gaddafi who were in their 70s. And they pieced together some evidence. They basically said that this guy had a debate with Gaddafi. Gaddafi didn't like what he said. Gaddafi said, kill him. They ended up making fake passports and they ended up sending this guy to a fake whatever to Italy, right? So according to Gaddafi, they had left the country. The Italians said nobody arrived here. You know, I mean, how stupid can the Libyan regime be? You've popped off one of the most influential Shia clerics in the world, right? Which is a very, very devious and unnecessary act. And then you lie and say, oh, they left the country. Well, Lebanon never forgot about that. Because what Lebanon did is one of the sons of Gaddafi, he, I think, has a Lebanese wife, and he ended up in Lebanon during the war. In 2011, what do you think the Lebanese did? They clapped him in irons and he's still in prison to this day. They said, you took our cleric, we're going to put you in prison. Gaddafi's son, who's now standing for elections, he's only one of his only surviving sons, the most famous one, I forgot his name. He's campaigned for years to try to get his brother freed. It's not happening. The Lebanese are a weak country, a poor country. But at this moment in time, Libya is even more poor and weak, right? So the Lebanese said basically, literally up yours. Do what you want. We're not letting this guy go, right? And this particular guy gave a fatwa claiming that the Alawites are Muslims. So it was because of this influential fatwa, which was misguided. It was only given as a form of bringing together people. But really inside the Alawiyya are not Muslims, right? That today people are confused. because the Alawiya will keep citing this fatwa saying, look, this particular Shia cleric gave us a fatwa. And they got a second fatwa from somebody, if I'm not mistaken, who is somebody who was already a very problematic figure for Muslims anyway. Al-Husayni, Sharif al-Husayni of Al-Quds, Jerusalem, right? The infamous mufti from a line of muftis, very influential family, who basically told the Muslims to go and fight with Hitler, right? And Hitler championed him. And there's pictures of him where he's spewing the Jews use it that say, look, he told, I think he even said it. Netanyahu even said it. He says, Husseini went and said to Hitler, kill all the Jews. Husseini didn't say that, but for sure Husseini was part of, he was Ottoman, right? He was under the Ottomans at that time. The Ottomans were aligned in the First World War with the Germans, and in the Second World Wars, obviously, what was happening is England had made or was trying to make the state of Israel, so it served the interest of Husseini to go to the Germans and say to them, hey, look, this is what's happening, right? I'm siding with you. But it didn't mean that he was for the genocide or anything like that. But he was a problematic guy anyway. He created a lot of problems. He also said they were Muslims. Now, clearly, if you know his personality, you know he's doing that for votes, right? He's one of those kind of guys. So this has confused the Muslim Ummah. But like I said, we have the Qadiani, the Ahmadiyya in our country. Only we know their true belief. And we can say with clarity they are not Muslims. But outside of Pakistan, they are perceived as Muslims everywhere else, right? Likewise, the Iraqis have the Mandians, they have the Yazidis, they have many groups, only they knew about them. And today we've learned about some of their names because of war. Likewise, Lebanon and Syria have a host of different religio ethnicities, such as the Durziya, such as the Ismailiya, such as the Kurds, the Alawiya, Nusayriya, and Christian denominations, right? And only they know about them. We only learned today because of war. Likewise, Turkey, about 20% to 25% of Turkish population are Alawis, which are like Shia, but it's a syncretic religion of Shia beliefs and folk beliefs of Turkey. Nobody knows about them, right? But the Turks know about them. So there's a lot of confusion regarding the Alawiyya. And when the war started, all these Muslim groups sent forces into Syria only because the Bashar is Alawi, right? Now, we cannot say anything about the faith of Bashar. Why? Even if he's an Alawi, we don't know. He may be a Muslim proper. He may not believe in Ali. But I've heard from the horse's mouth that the Alawis secretly, they believe that Ali is Allah. But especially after the war, many people are dissatisfied and they're turning away from that. I know of Sunni girls that marry Alawi men, right? That must mean that those Alawis don't believe. Because if you don't know your religion, if you ask somebody who doesn't know his religion, what's your belief? He's going to look at the predominant religion, which is Sunnism, and he's going to say the same thing, right? So we cannot typecast all Alawis and just say they're out of the fold of Islam. Just like we can't typecast the Ismailiya Shia, we can't typecast the Alawis in Turkey. We have to hold our tongue until we hear something from them, right? So Bashar says he's Muslim, so Bashar is Muslim. So this group gained legitimacy and started to gain power. So those who were outcast for centuries, then they were servants and slaves in your houses. Slowly, by 1962 or 1963, with the Ba'ath takeover of the Alawites, became the most powerful people in Syria. There was a huge outcry. Why? Because the Syrian population are majority Sunnis, and they said, how can we be ruled by non-Muslims? Right? That was the huge outcry. But because these are barbaric regimes, they will do the most inhumane things to you possible to silence you. So even now, I'm getting reports, even now, on the cusp of defeat, nobody in Damascus is saying anything. I've asked people, man, I've asked, I said, what's the word on the street? What's the word on the street? Silence, complete and utter silence. Why? Because people are too scared to even say, hey, hey, do you know what's happening? We're going to win. No. Scared. Saddam Hussein, the same thing under Saddam Hussein. When even in England, a refugee, he was so indoctrinated that when someone spoke about Saddam Hussein, he went, shh, shh, man, the window. In England, can you believe? That's the amount of fear that these people had from their leaders, right? And it's unbelievable the amount of fear that they have, right? But the West and the regime have typecast this group to be a bad group, right? This group, once upon a time, was affiliated with Al-Qaeda, but it's shown itself for the last 6 years that it's got nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. I personally know people on that side. I know defectors. And if you know anything about Tox Sharif from Walthamstow in London, he's a friend of mine. He went on an aid convoy to Syria and he spent 10 years in Syria until the British people stripped him of his nationality. He's not a terrorist. The BBC did a skit on him. Everybody knows he's been doing charity work, but the Brits have taken his nationality away. So he's stuck in Syria. If you YouTube him, he will tell you details about this group, right? Not all of it is rosy, by the way, because one problem with this group is how they treat their prisoners. Most groups treat their prisoners very bad. There's no human rights. There's no regard for life. This group has had some record of treating prisoners badly, even though al-Jolani says that those people are being punished. We will have to wait and see, right? So the regime believes that this group is going to be worse than the regime. Obviously, everybody else in the country believes that nothing can be worse than the regime. What everybody needs to be cautious about is the same thing that people should have been cautious about with the Taliban when they first, Taliban 2.0. How will they treat their people? How will they treat their political prisoners? I personally asked female students of mine that have lived under this group. I said, are you, because Alawi people in Damascus asked me personally, they said that will we be forced to change our belief? Will we be forced to wear hijab? So I asked girls from the other side, I said, are you forced to wear niqab? And they said, no, we're not forced to wear niqab. I said, are you forced to wear hijab? I never got a clear answer. Right? I think I got a diplomatic kind of an answer, but I never got a clear answer. But I do know that everybody in that area wears hijab. But I was told indirectly that no, there are Christians, there are Kurds, there are Alawiya, they don't wear hijab. But they never answered me clearly if they are not wearing hijab in their area or not. Right? Tox was tortured. Right, Tox was arrested by that group and he was tortured in prison, and he gives his account on YouTube. You can watch it. And there's another American guy, I can't remember his name. He's someone that worked for Huda TV and someone that did some sort of journalism for CNN as well. He's on the USA, according to himself, he's on the USA Watch hit list. Just like al-Awlaki was on the assassination list. He has been, they tried to assassinate him 4 times, right? So he doesn't go back to America. He was also arrested by that group, and his video is also on YouTube. Watch both of their videos. They give you an insider account of that group, by the way. So this group now has morphed. It's got a fully running of sorts, rudimentary bureaucracy. They're all educated people. And think about it. In order for this group to survive, it needs to show a new face, right? If you're going to do the same things that everybody else did, the Americans don't want you, the Brits don't want you, the French don't want you, the Israelis don't want you. Nobody wants you. So even if you are evil, you're going to have to change face to survive. But this guy, everybody knows that he's changed. Even the people inside say that we have changed. He fought Al-Qaeda, he fought Daesh, he fought every other group to maintain his independence. And he says that we can dissolve anytime we want. He goes, we want a broad-based government where everybody in Syria is represented, right? And he's reassured the Christians, he's reassured Alawis. Look what they did in Daraa. They allowed the soldiers to escape. They said, go, no killing, just go and we won't kill you, Right? If you stay, then we're going to fight. Now, this is a political move anyway, so we can't say anything about this. But what people are surprised about is people say that where did this group come from? That's because Syria is off the radar for everybody, and people think that after ISIS was wiped out, there's nothing happening in Syria. No, this group was one of the last strong groups still surviving, and they've always been there. They've always pledged to destroy the government, and the government has always pledged to destroy them. It just so happened that its backers are no longer there. They took their chance, which is military strategy. They got together with some of the other small rebel groups still around, and they attacked Aleppo as a unifying front. I've got a friend of mine. His name's Amir as well. He's a regime soldier. He's an accountant working at the airport, and he says that a few hours before they approached, he goes, "I left my position and I ran away." He goes, "Now I wish Bashar goes because I'm a wanted man, because I defected from the army." Right? This guy was, what the Syrian regime does and what Hezbollah was doing is they were arresting people in Lebanon, forcibly sending them back so they could be conscripted. Most of the army is conscripted. These are young people that don't want to fight. He didn't want to fight, so he was in hiding for a long time until he couldn't hide anymore, and he just turned up at the police station and they drafted him. And he's been in the army for 6-7 years. His salary is $30. Who's going to die for $30 a month? This is why they're all going now. To be honest with you, they're sick. Everybody is sick and everybody is tired. The Alawites, some of them still back. There's an Alawi girl that I know. I sent her a message yesterday and she got very angry with me. Die-hard supporter, because they know that they have to throw their lot behind Bashar, because Bashar is bad, but if we don't back Bashar, then the freedom fighters or the rebels, whatever you want to call them, are going to kill us. So they have no choice. But the honest truth is that the majority of them are sick of him now as well. Because what has he done in the last 10 years for Syria? 650,000 people dead, half of the nation displaced, many millions of refugees abroad, right? Tens of thousands of footage, pictures and videos. Literally, I'm saying 10,000 was one person who took 10,000 photos of killed prisoners, starved to death, tortured to death, and he sent them abroad secretly. That's just 10,000. And Bashar had the audacity to lie in public and say, no, these are fake, right? So this is just, a fraction of his crimes. The country is done with him, right? So yes, we support him because we want free Syria, but we have to be cautious as well and pray that he doesn't do any injustices that jeopardizes his long-term future. The two problems in Syria now are, if this group takes over, what will happen to any other group that helped him? Is it going to be a repeat of Afghanistan, where the Mujahideen, sometimes they got together on a mission, but for the most part, they were fighting each other. And when the Mujahideen left, when the Russians left, the Mujahideen took over Kabul and started killing each other. Kabul was not a destroyed city. In fact, out of all the cities, it was probably the most intact city because that was the seat of government. That's where the Soviets were. Yes, they had Secret Service agents, KHAD agents that were knocking on your door, kidnapping you in the middle of the night, torturing you. Charhi, I think it is, the sick prison just outside Kabul. Just as bad as Tadmor, Sedania in Syria, torture, you name it, right? The Russians and the Afghani communists were just as bad as the Assadists. But the Assadists obviously had a longer run. So the Mujahideen started destroying Kabul. They literally destroyed the city of Kabul. They killed tens of thousands of people. People got sick of them, and the Taliban came in and people supported the Taliban. I'm probably going to get the correct name of the thingy here. All right, okay, thank you. No problem, Aisha. I'll record this and then you can listen to the rest of it. So what's going to happen now is, Jazakallah Fatani, what's going to happen is once the group takes over, are they going to start fighting amongst themselves? This is what people think is going to happen. Are they going to fight amongst themselves and create mayhem? And up till now, Damascus is not being destroyed. But if they start to fight each other, Damascus is going to be destroyed. If they don't do this and they are true in what they say they are going to do, and they're going to form a coalition government, then yes, Syria can be saved, right? I really want to visit Syria. I've been told not to by my teacher, and I don't even trust Syria because 10 years ago, openly on Facebook, I was talking rubbish about Syria. So I don't feel safe going into Syria until the regime's gone. The minute the regime's gone, I have so many friends in Syria, I'm gonna go. So we just make dua for this group, and whatever Jolani says he is, if you listen to his interviews, he certainly seems like he's a decent person now. When I say decent, I don't mean decent as in decent, I mean he's moderate now, right? And this group always existed. It never came out of nowhere. It's always been there. Let's hope the Kurds don't fight for an independent homeland, and let's hope that this group then doesn't turn against the Kurds. Because if this group turns against the Kurds and there's open warfare, the country is going to stay destroyed. If they allow the Kurds to have a semi-autonomous region like it already has, that's doable. Even if they allow the Kurds to have an independent, totally independent country in the north, I reckon that's doable as well, right? But I don't think they will. But it all rests on what the Kurds will do and what he will do now. Let's hope that the army totally melts away, and let's hope that Bashar leaves on his private plane to Dubai or to Russia or to Iran, and problem over. And we pray that these groups don't fall apart fighting each other. This is
that's the actual point here, isn't it? They can't leave anyone behind.
One thing that I think what's going to happen is there's a general amnesty, right? He said that we don't want war, we don't want revenge, we don't want fighting. I can understand that, and that will happen. But I also believe that when they look at the mukhabarat, the intelligence, the agency videos of the horrific torture videos you can see, I'm talking horrific stuff. You wouldn't believe that a Muslim could do stuff like that. We're talking we're talking Mexican cartel stuff here, right? Those people's faces are still on video. Many of them have been killed, many of them are still alive. And I think there's gonna be a hunt for those people. And I want that hunt. I want those people brought to justice.
Yeah, they have to be. Yeah, they have to be.
With immunity, you guys went around torturing Sunnis, raping girls. Only why? Because they wanted freedom, right? And they would make you say, La ilaha illa Bashar. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, what's going to happen to Bashar? He needs to be brought to justice as well, doesn't he?
Bashar, there was a time when Bashar was wanted, his wife was wanted by the international community for possible war crimes, but there's been a softening of, especially with the Middle East, they tried to normalize with him last year. The West would rather have the devil they know than the devil they don't know. So if they're going to have the devil that they do know, then they're going to have to look over his crimes. I don't know his status now. I know his wife was wanted in England. I know he was wanted for possible war crimes, but I don't know his status now. And I know that the West has a list of they have a list of people that are on the wanted list from the government, from the intelligence agencies, because they built a dossier through journalism. They built a dossier of names and faces. So those people are not safe. Those people, they get arrested all the time. Germany arrests them. Wherever they end up, they get identified and get arrested. Right? Just like some Afghan commanders got arrested in other countries. In England, one got arrested. So those guys, Bashar can probably save himself, right? I don't know. If he goes to Dubai, he's not going to be able to show his face around. But if he goes to Russia, he's going to be okay. If he goes to Iran, he's going to be okay. But his people that are left behind, the regime forces, I reckon they're going to be put on trial. And then that's where the problems start as well, because then the West is going to accuse them of arbitrary injustice, and stuff like that, right? So they're going to say, "Oh, there's no due process, there's no proper trial."
Yeah,
they're going
to accuse them of kangaroo court and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then they're going to smear his name, right? They're going to smear his name, because the biggest problem, had he not been affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and I've heard someone say that he was never affiliated with them. He just deliberately showed himself to be, just to get away from the grips of ISIS. But I don't know, Allah Alam. maybe his interviews
we'll see though. Yeah.
his interviews give off the impression that he was with them for a while, but his thinking has changed. The thing is that that name still taints him, right? So it's always, they're still using that name, saying it's a terrorist organization, right? On what basis? If you look at his interviews from 4 or 5 years ago, he's not just saying it now. He's always said it. He says, "Why do you have a problem with us? What have we done to anybody? We're trying to establish an internal government." Right. And even when he was bombed by the Americans, he had a soft response to them. He said, "Why did you do this to us?" He's always said to them, "Come and see us, how we live. Come and see what we're doing, and then be the judge." Right. So that's
we'll see though. We'll see, yeah.
We'll see. Sorry, I thought my answer was going to be 2 minutes, but my answer turned out to be long. But I hope it's cleared up. Hope it's cleared up everything. Hope you're probably up to speed now with what's happening in Syria, right?
It's good to have a discussion. Thank you for that. It's good to have a discussion as well and have your own perspective on it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah. So it's not. I mean, this group has not just appeared from nowhere. It's always been lurking in the background. I know a Syrian girl. She's a YouTuber, and she's from that area. Right, and she goes, "I can't go home." She goes, "There's no way of me crossing into Idlib," because she left Idlib to study in Damascus. She's in Hama. She's in Hama. Yeah, she lives in Hama, and she left to study. And she lived with her sister and her sister's husband, and then they managed to immigrate. So they left the country. So she's left on her own. She graduated, and it tied in with when the borders were closed. And she said, "There's no way of me getting back." She goes, "The only way of me getting back in is if I get smuggled in." And she goes, "I can never then get back out." Right? So she's outside now. And I messaged her the other day and I said to her, "Now at least you can meet your family." You must have seen the reunions between families, right? That's because whoever ended up there could never get into Aleppo. Whoever ended up in Aleppo that was in Idlib could never get back. So after 8 years, these people are seeing each other. One prisoner was interviewed. He said, "I was arrested at the border of Lebanon and I was charged with terrorism. It's been 8 years I've been in prison and I haven't seen my family." They don't allow you to see your family. Your family doesn't even know. Your family doesn't even know. There was a Turkish guy they arrested. He spent 20-something years in prison. His mom thought he's dead. After 20 years, he was freed and he went back to Turkey as a middle-aged man. And thank God his mom was still alive. I mean, I don't want to get into these kind of stories. There's a book I posted on the group called Just 5 Minutes. This book was written, it was clearly written in Arabic and translated into English. So as a result, much of the language has been toned down, right? So you don't really get the true feel of it. They've made prison life to be ordinary, even though she's describing horrific stuff, but they're not using the correct language. But read that book and then read the Amnesty International report on Syria and the regime's crimes. It's horrific.
It's sad, isn't it? Sad.
Yeah. So we can only pray. There was a time in the early period where I was against Bashar. I spoke out against him on YouTube and on everything. I was arguing with people inside Syria in the start. Then I toned down my approach and I was like, look, wars destabilize countries, revolutions destabilize countries. So I said, look, the Islamic principle that you don't rebel against your leader. But then there's an understanding of that as well. So then I kind of would speak to all of these people from these groups and say, look, it's better to not rebel, right? And a lot of them were my students, so they listened to me. But from inside, I realized now they probably didn't like what I was saying, especially when I started even at one point supporting the regime. Not supporting, but kind of supporting in the sense that these rebels should all go. I hope the rebels will get destroyed. And then I would talk about Iran as well, and the students would hate Iran. And I couldn't understand why, but now, because at that time I didn't know exactly what Iran's role was. But over time, with Hezbollah coming and doing atrocities and everything in Syria, I can understand why they hate Iran. Iran should just go back to its own country. Hezbollah should go back. And for sure, this group is not going to have any beef with Israel. Why? They need to build their own country up. It's going to take 30, 40 years. Are they really going to bother with Israel? Israel is a superpower in the region, right? Yes, if the Muslims got together, they'd defeat they would defeat Israel, but they tried that 2 times and they failed miserably in 67 and 72, right? So I don't think after that they learned their lesson and they're never going to mess with Israel, and especially now, right? Now, I bet even the ones that probably thought, should we go? Should we do it? Should we do it? They're thinking, oh, thank God we didn't, right?
Mhm.
In fact, they're helping. You have Sisi, you have King Abdullah actively helping and supporting the Israeli regime. And for all
Yeah.
those people that had a problem saying, that why Saudi and Dubai normalizing relations? Well, Sudan and Morocco and Egypt, Egypt for decades had normalized,
Normalized, yeah.
and Sudan and Morocco it's been a long time for them. They've normalized. So people don't study, don't read, don't want to understand anything, and just get emotional. So all of a sudden, oh, Dubai normalization, Saudi normalization. Well, what about Morocco? What about Egypt? What about Jordan? They've normalized a long time back, right? So likewise, when it comes to this group, there's nothing new about this group. It's not just come from nowhere and all of a sudden there's a fifth column and what's going on and why now and why Syria being attacked. No, Syria was always the bad guy. Bashar al-Assad has been the enemy from the 12 years ago. This group was always there. They just had the treaty that they weren't going to attack. But even that treaty was broken because as of the last year, Syria was kept on bombing them. So they saw their chance and they took over. Alhamdulillah. I was very hesitant in the beginning thinking, oh, I don't know. Is there going to be more problems? But so far, we've not seen any problems. And I'm getting more and more optimistic. Speaking to Syrians, there's a real feeling this time of, they're hesitant because they don't want a repeat of what happened last time. But there's a real feeling inside I can feel from them, of please, Allah, let this be the time. Let this be the time. I've spoken to a refugee I know in Lebanon, and she's like, she taught my children. She was my student once upon a time as well. She says, you don't know the feeling of being called Syrian, like in a racist way, right? The Turks are very racist towards the Syrians. And let me tell you something, right? Iraqis, the most richest and educated and cultured Arabs, Iraqis, right? Living in Iraq was a dream during the time of Saddam Hussein, apart from the fact that you had to keep your mouth shut, just like Bashar, but everything was prosperous, right? And when the war broke out, it was the middle-class girls of doctors and lawyers and those kind of girls that ended up in the brothels of every single nightclub and brothel in the Arab world. So in Syria and in Jordan, middle class girls that, were well pampered, well looked after, dads were middle class professionals. These girls ended up as prostitutes in the brothels of Syria and Jordan. And today, in the brothels of Lebanon and Jordan, we have Syrian girls. Yesterday, it was Iraqi girls in Syria. Today, it's Syrian girls in those countries, right? And all of this information is available. It's been available for the last 10 years. Somebody said to me in England, oh, because I posted something up, this is a CIA plot, and no, like that's a CIA Mossad agent saying, La ilaha illa Bashar, blah, blah, blah. And this is all, how can you fall for this? And I said, come on. I said, I've lived in the Middle East. These videos were on YouTube. YouTube in your countries is censored. I've been watching these videos for 10 years. Ask any Arab. These are not CIA made. I mean, how can people get so foolish? This means you haven't got a clue. You haven't got a clue. You don't know what's been going on in Syria for 10 years. If you're looking at these torture videos and you're saying this is CIA agents and this is Mossad. This every Arab will tell you this. I saw it with my own eyes for the last 10 years. I know families who've had brothers killed, who've had husbands killed, fathers killed. I know Syrians living in Jordan who've got terrible stories that I can tell you. Syrians living in Turkey, Syrians living in Lebanon, and not only do they have horror stories to tell you, they've been treated very badly by the host nations they're in. The Lebanese are racist against them. The Turks are racist against them. The Syrians one time were very respected. Today, if you say Syrian, it's like, the same thing as saying Afghani. Sorry for the Afghani in the group, but the Afghanis don't really have much in the way of respect, because wherever they go, they go as refugees. And if you say Afghani, oh, broken country, right? So if you now say like another war-torn country, whatever, in Africa somewhere, people are not going to look upon you with respect. The Syrians had a respectable name, and today they have the lowest name in the Arab world, right? Nobody, if you say you're Syria, people look down upon you. And I saw this with my own eyes, from being respectable people to being nothing. This is how racist Arabs are and Muslims are, and everybody generally is, right? So they get their honor and dignity back. So any questions? Mariam, any more questions? You asked one question, and Nasser and Shahid, you asked one question, and you got an hour's earful. But I hope it's,
No, I don't have any questions,
you've all
thank you,
probably got the picture now, right? I mean, I've covered everything, so you should be up to speed with what's happening now, where it started from, and why it's happening, and who this group is. So YouTube, Tokir Sharif, Tox Sharif. Listen to his interviews about YTS. And there's a black American guy. He gave an interview. This black American guy gave an interview in Mad Mamluks. Just look at Mad Mamluks' most recent podcast, right? That black guy is also living in Idlib. Tox, he's from London, Walthamstow. He's also living in Idlib. Watch his interview, because he's firsthand. You can trust him because he's firsthand account, right? And there's other stuff that you can watch as well, right? And information is there. Just people just, when it's off the radar, people don't want to watch. But Syria, because I have a vested interest in Syria, so I tend to know what's happening in that area.